Um, so first of all, I'll thank everyone who has joined us today. Thank you for joining. I'll start with a brief introduction of Indian Road Safety Campaign. Indian Road Safety Campaign is a part of Solve Foundation, and the mission is to make Indian roads safer. We have been conducting this Journey to Safety webinar series for the past 2.5 months in an effort to bring awareness over using the digital platforms. We have invited several experts from all across the world, and also we have covered various domains in the topics that we have been taking up in this webinar. Today, we are going to be discussing about how to build sustainable cities post-COVID. For this, we have invited Deepak and Amita ma'am for the session. The session is going to be hosted by Mr. Ivy Rao sir. Sir, please thank you for the session.
I would first like to welcome Ms. Dr. Amita Bhide, Sarika Panda, and Deepak Dash, all the participants and friends. Good afternoon. I am very happy to host this webinar, 13th in this weekly series being organized by IRSC. And today's webinar is about sustainable cities post-COVID. From the previous webinars, it has come out clear that road safety is a complex subject and needs contribution from all stakeholders to make roads safer for users. IRSC has been organizing these webinars with different sets of stakeholders to understand their views and suggestions for making roads safer. I would like to briefly talk about various issues of general interest with reference to road safety. United Nations had declared global plan for this last decade as decade of action for road safety, recommended 5 pillars: road safety management, safer roads and mobility, safer vehicles, safer road users, and post-crash response and emergency care. Uh, we all know that the Motor Vehicle Act has been modified last year with a lot of improvements and increasing the penalty for non-adherence to traffic rules. Now, one of the problems is that there is no evaluation of the accidents taking place every day to understand the actual reasons for the accidents. If you look at 2018 Ministry of Road Transport and Highways data about road accidents, it indicates an increasing trend, and about 4.6 lakh accidents have occurred with about 1.4 lakh fatalities, with Tamil Nadu contributing maximum number of accidents and Uttar Pradesh number of fatalities. And also the big concern is about the 72% of the fatalities are with mid-age group who are in most productive phase of their life, which impacts our growth. The accidents involve two-wheelers in about 35% cases and four-wheelers in about 24% cases. And also, it's surprising to know that 75% of the drivers involved in accidents have valid driving license. And also, the vehicle users are still not very aware of various features provided on the vehicles which assist the driver for safe driving. In case of two-wheelers, only 30% drivers use helmets, and in case of passenger cars, only 25% drivers wear seat belts. And also the accidents indicate that about 29% of two-wheeler users who got into accidents were not using helmets. In case of four-wheeler passenger car accident, the 38% of drivers involved in fatalities were not wearing seat belts. When we look back over last decade, though India has considerably improved our road infrastructure, the automobiles almost at par with Europe, and also awareness amongst the road users, and of course the post-accident emergency treatment services have improved. But India has not seen any improvement in the reduction in accidents and fatalities. So we have still long way to go to achieve the goal of zero accidents and fatalities. Even the increased penalty for not following motor vehicle rules seems to have not impacted, uh, so we don't see any visible change in road user behavior. It is essential to bring in this attitudinal shift in road users to in their response to road safety. The COVID-19 lockdown has taught us a lot of lessons. We pleasantly realized that a lot of work, many activities can be done from home without any movement from home. Because of no economic activity and very less vehicles, we could get to breathe clean air and pleasantly see birds in local colony parks. Now, with the government lifting the lockdown for revival of economic activities, will we go back to the way we used to work, or learn from COVID lockdown experience and optimize people and material movement to address the transport related issue to some extent to improve the air quality and reduction in road accidents? Also, in general, all the restrictions during the COVID lockdown were followed by everyone, which is an encouraging indication about adherence to rules. Today, we have with us three experts from different domains: Dr. Amitabh Bhide, uh, Sarika Panda Bhatt from Nagaro. Sorry, Dr. Amita is from TISS, and Mr. Deepak Dash from Times of India. I would try to give brief introduction. Dr. Amita Bhide, Dean School of Habitat Studies, Center for Environment Health, School of, and also she is professor in TIS Mumbai campus. She has been deeply involved in issues related to urban poor communities, community organization, and housing rights movements and advocacy groups. Professor Bide's recent work at the School of Habitat Studies has been on issues of urban development, in particular those concerning urban transformations and their link to inclusive and sustainable development. The geographic focus of her work is Mumbai, while her recent engagement is with small and medium towns. She also heads a Mumbai Eastward Social and Economic Transformation Program, an action research project that seeks to create a model of inclusive urban development in Mumbai East Ward, the poorest municipal ward in Mumbai. Sarika Panda Bhatt, Associate Director, Nagaro. Prior to this, she was manager in WRI. She is leading the Rahagiri Day movement in NCR region, which is India's first sustained car-free day initiatives. No vehicle road days have become very popular in Delhi and Gurgaon. She is also helping other cities to replicate this hugely successful concept, leading the non-motorized transport work in Delhi region, and also provides logistic support to the functioning in Delhi. Prior to WRI, India. She worked, her work involved in various prestigious projects around master planning, city development plan, comprehensive mobility plan, planning of new townships. She has also worked extensively on environmental and social impact assessment projects. Mr. Deepak Dash, Senior Associate Editor, Times of India. He is a strong supporter of IRSC activities and he is also Director of IRSC. We will first have all the panelists to speak for about 6 to 8 minutes about their views about road safety and sustainable development of cities. After which we'll have panel discussion and take up questions from participants. I will now first request Amita Bide to give her initial remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Nagaraju. And thanks, Swati. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Am I audible? I'd go ahead.
Yeah, you are there.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, okay.
Okay, fine. Okay. So I will just make 3 or 4 basic points to begin with. Okay. And the first is that to talk about cities and sustainabilities is to talk of a extremely complex kind of a notion, because in many ways the scale of a city that we are talking about, it really involves issues of scales. And for a very long time historically, cities have always been passing on their externalities to many different levels, sometimes to the region immediately adjoining them, sometimes to regions which are very far, and therefore footprints of cities today almost stretch. So when we talk of world city, they actually have almost worldwide footprints in some ways. So the scale and these externalities somehow create a imagination that cities can grow in a extremely unlimited manner, that their productivity knows no limits. Okay. And I think therefore the issue of city scale when we think about sustainability is very critical. When we think about road safety from that point of view and locate it within the vast array of issues of city sustainability per se, road safety will be one part. But in the Indian context, allow me to say that roads are an integral part of life as much as perhaps homes and workplaces are. So they should be like ingredient number 3. The planning around roads, however, has only considered a very limited set of stakeholders, and that largely being vehicle owners and drivers, and the second being people who are seen as obstructions. However, need to think of road safety also from the point of view that streets, roads are elements which are circulatory elements within the entire city, and they perform very critical roles in the life of an Indian city. In the Indian city, road is not just for movement, but it is also for lingering. It is also a place of getting together. It is also a place where life is often lived. Okay. So I think this is one thing that one needs to consider, and only widening roads, creating flyovers, increasing the density of roads, or on the other hand, improving the quality of vehicles and educating pedestrians. I think these are also things which have their place, but they have a limited place. There is a third point, again from point of view of perspective, that I'm going to talk about, and which is that there are, I think, a whole lot of webinars currently being held with this post-COVID kind of a thing. Okay. And I'm actually wondering why, I mean, is it the hope within us that makes us imagine a post-COVID, that it is too easy a solution for us? Yes, after post-COVID, that most things that many of us from wherever we come are going to change. That slight bit of awareness that we have, and you, Mr. Nagaraju, referred to the possibility of working from home. At the same time, I think you have not perhaps articulated the fact that the same COVID crisis also brought out the fact that there were millions of migrants who were caught in distress, and for them, the entire COVID crisis, COVID experience has actually been an experience of distress where they couldn't move, where it tells us also about how our cities are dependent on labor which is brought from such far off, right? From Jharkhand and Bihar, and the entire divides between the north and the south and the east and the west of the country, and that how we treat these migrants, right? So in terms of a post-COVID situation, actually, from either a social point of view or an economic point of view or an environmental point of view, okay, there are reports now that the entire COVID period, while it may have reduced car use, it had generated immense amounts of indoor pollution, one. Second, that it has also enhanced the use of plastic, especially for packaging material, in a very, very, very big way. In fact, it seems to have doubled or tripled in the entire period. So I think finding short-term solutions and easy solutions, or rather hopeful, romantic solutions for something as a complex a subject as sustainability perhaps is of limited use. We need to work our way, our thought, our collective energies and policies towards thinking about what sustainable city can actually mean for us and work for it. And that it's not an easy journey.
Thank you, ma'am, for your interesting interpretation about COVID and post-COVID, what generally people expect and your views on it. I mean, the COVID lockdown experience, everybody thought we have some improvements seen in the environmental and also road, and also we have realized that working from home is a possibility. So we thought maybe we could extend that experience to optimize, especially the movement of people and material, which would uh, help to actually decongest most of the traffic problems we have. You what you have expressed is a very, I mean, new and very interesting uh, uh, thought. So we'll further discuss on that. I understand that Ms. Sarika is not could not join the webinar. So I now request Mr. Deepak Dash to uh, address by giving his initial opening remarks.
Okay, better. Okay. So, thank you a lot for calling me on a Sunday afternoon. And I completely agree with what ma'am said. The cities are going unlimited. I remember, I'll just give you one or two examples, then I'll come to the subject. When Delhi recently, there was a plan to, improve the roads, right from eastern part of Delhi to airport. I know one of the consultants was asked, can you prepare a road which will take care of any amount of traffic? I think that was the primary point that we are looking at expanding roads, building flyovers, everything that will take care of any amount of traffic, which is not possible because any planning cannot happen for unlimited number of people or unlimited number of vehicles. That is why cities are becoming unsustainable. Again, second point, what ma'am said, I think all urban transport experts, particularly people like her who think of everyone in the city, they have been talking about the need to go from just moving vehicle to moving people. And if you see recently in past maybe 2 months, there has been a lot of talk. One of the ministries that the housing ministry, housing and urban affairs, they have started a big initiative to push cycling and making cities friendly for walkers. I have a very different point of view on that particularly. Uh, Maybe it sounds very good because when you go to any other country, we see people walking, we see people cycling from home to office, home to workplace, home to restaurants. If you go to countries like New Zealand, you will find that people are actually skating from their home to the restaurants to have food. But ours is a completely different problem. Our problem is we have a very harsh weather for a long time. I don't even I have been asking these questions to planners, experts, officers. I said, how many of you can actually take a cycle and cycle for 4 or 5 kilometers to come to your office in a month of June? Can you do it in Delhi? So the point is to make a city sustainable. If we just keep on talking about it, it is not going to happen. It has to be done in a manner that people can actually use it. Like I give her my own example. I completely believe in public transport. I don't believe in a private vehicle. And I have been planning to buy a cycle so that I can take a cycle from my home to my office and to some of the ministry. But actually in the month of April, May, June, July, you can't take a cycle from home to office. So those are the practical things that we need to see. When it comes to road safety, because we're talking about sustainable cities and at the same time also talking about sustainable living that is somehow related to our road safety issue. I have one interesting or maybe I have a thought that there has been a lot of talk that once this lockdown is over, we'll suddenly see high number of two-wheelers coming onto the street. And there is also probability that more number of two-wheelers will be sold. If you look at the automobile, Mr. Rao is more knowledgeable than me. That the automobile industry is actually looking at two-wheeler sales in a big way. But at the same time, we don't have a standardized helmet in our country, which is compulsory. Maybe these are the things that we need to see. Young people who are driving and taking bikes, two-wheelers, they will be wearing a helmet which is not mandatorily ISA standard mark. So to make a city sustainable and also to make our people's life safe, we have to do something like I think what Mem will also say and many other experts also say, we need to segregate traffic. You can't put all the traffic together. You can't have cycle, pedestrian, vehicles, everyone coming on the same stretch. That will completely become an unsustainable city. Maybe these are the time when we need to think of it. When we are sitting at home, the bureaucrats, policymakers, when they have enough time, they don't have to deal with day-to-day business. I think it's a high time that we think of how the cities can become better and better, and also roads become safer. I strongly agree with what ma'am said. Usage of plastic has gone up like anything. I know Drinking Water and Sanitation Secretary, Mr. Parameswaran Nair, he recently wrote an article that one of the biggest drawback during this entire COVID period has been the usage of single-use plastic. Because that became the basic way of delivering things, getting things. But then also we know that it happened all of a sudden. Maybe the time has come how we can make cities better, how we ensure that workplaces close to our houses, our place of living. I think that their planners have a big problem, a big challenge. Policymakers have a big challenge. Town planners have big issues, primarily because, unfortunately, in our country, first we have built cities, now we are thinking of how to retrofit things. And retrofitting is much more problematic. That is the reason why, when government talked about smart cities in 5 years, we saw not a single smart city happened. Had it been a greenfield city, it might have happened. So maybe all of us have to contribute. Planners have to contribute. You, me, students of who are maybe joining us today, volunteers of IRSC, everyone, all of us have to somehow get into the idea of shared, getting into shared mobility, maybe getting into a little bit of walking, a little bit of cycling, and also see how we can reduce the wastage that we are creating. That's my primary point of view.
Thank you, Deepak, for your initial remarks. Now, I would request Amita Bire to, I mean, like government has announced a very ambitious plan of developing smart cities, and they have listed a number of locations which they want to develop as smart city. So I just want to understand uh, how these smart cities would cater for the transportation needs, and will they be sustainable? I mean, will they, I mean, are compatible for sustainable mobility in terms of providing the walking tracks and cycling tracks separately, so that people are not worried using bicycles, as Mr. Deepak mentioned, on road. Like all major metros, it's impossible to use a bicycle in the so much mixed traffic we have on the roads. So I would like to know your views on this.
Yeah, thank you. Uh, so I think if you look at smart cities as a project itself, it's a template-based project. And when I say template-based project, it means basically that every city writes its own script of how it wants to develop. Right? So there are a set of ideas, okay, but specific technologies are actually adopted by every city. So therefore, then there is the influence of the particular state government. There is also an influence of the central government, plus the politics or the corporates of that time, right? So this needs to be understood. There is not the same program which is being implemented everywhere. Having said that, smart transportation is a very, very big element of smart cities, and within which there are different cities who are thinking about either metros, or they are thinking about public transport. They are thinking about smart streets. They are thinking about how cycle uh, sharing and cycle operating can be made, and streets can be made friendlier towards that. Okay. So different cities are experimenting, I would say, with different things. Okay. One thing which I see really as a limitation across all of these is that any thought of sustainable transportation has also to be first based on a clear assessment of what is the density of roads in the city, what is the density of roads that the city aspires for. Okay. And then, having looked at that, because otherwise, for example, I come from Mumbai, and what we see is when we plan for housing, then we don't plan for roads. Okay. And then not having roads becomes a problem, and then widening roads is taken up as a separate issue. So our cities have this very typical issue of thinking in fragmented lines. Okay. So the point that I'm making is that there are several projects of sustainable transportation, but the thought behind them is often not comprehensive enough. Okay. There are some cities, however, which have tried, and I think those are interesting experiments. So Bangalore has tried for pedestrianization and encouraging bicycle tracks. Pune has experimented in a very, very interesting manner about initiating smart streets with several components, including the ideas of segregation of traffic, including how does one make moving and movement friendlier for pedestrians, people who are visually handicapped and visually challenged and physically challenged as well. How does one make movement possible and friendlier for children and parents and school buses to cross? How does one make streets green? So there are multiple thoughts which would come in. The experience there, I think, is also very interesting. I think in the past 15 or 20 years, with the advent of the car culture, uh, all car users expect the roads are made for cars, that the purpose of a car is to move fast. Okay? And any of these impacts or any of these movements, projects towards sustainable transportation, actually, whatever their impact, they slow down cars. Okay? In fact, one of the principles of sustainable transportation is often that car within the city should not travel beyond 40 kilometers per hour. That's like a max speed, and perhaps it should be even lower than that. Now, I think if you take this kind of a metric and begin to evaluate other components of sustainable transportation with respect to this, then one will see that there was a lot of opposition in Pune to the initiatives for smart streets. Smart streets are friendlier to pedestrians. Smart streets are friendly people who are challenged physically or visually. Smart streets are useful for public transport because there is a segregated lane for them. But often some of these initiatives are not so liked, I would say, by private vehicle users. Now, how does one make, because I think when we talk about private vehicles, all of us are implicated in a very curious manner, because it is largely the middle class and the upper classes who are also implicated both as vehicle users and perhaps also users of passenger traffic, and who have shifted away from public transport. Okay? And I think that is perhaps very critical. Is it possible for middle class to go back to public transport, increase its popularity, reduce the number of cars, and only then can some of these smart street ideas be also popular. Okay? The idea behind smart cities, one of the opening statements in the entire mission says, these are supposed to be like lights, guiding lights, which other cities and the rest of the city can follow. Okay? Now, if these are the guiding lights and they themselves are inviting so much opposition, we need to think about how some of these projects actually become popular, how some of these ideas become popular. Okay? In India, given the density of different kinds of users, there are inevitably going to be clashes between users. Pavement dwellers, street vendors, bicyclists, pedestrians, private vehicles, public transport. When all of us compete for that same space, we will really need to think in an extremely complex manner. And one of the ways in which one can think is to also perhaps complicate and think about different scales of streets. So the small street in a neighborhood area, as opposed to a road which is of medium length, how should that be planned? What is a smart road? And then what is a smart highway or a smart main road? So I don't know, but I think, and so there is a beginning which has been made in the smart cities program, but there is a very, very long way to go.
Does this mean that after all these cities who are, being working for under the smart city project, once they do everything what they are doing, there will not be any minimum expectations from these smart cities, or there is a minimum requirement from transport and other aspects which they would be meeting, but it would be much more than that. Is my understanding correct?
I don't know whether I
Because
communicated
let me
clearly.
just add one sentence.
Yeah.
I had been talking about what is a smart city with a lot of people working in urban development.
Uh,
Somehow till now I didn't get any right
yeah,
clear answer for
yeah.
this.
No, that is why
So
I think you are right, Mr. Tao.
yeah,
Smart city is therefore a template, right? And,
yes,
and a template which is also being operationalized in a very, very small part of the city. In
oh
most
yeah,
cases, it is less than 1% area of the city.
oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Not a single city so far in India has come up with a more universal or more citywide solution. They have indicated that in their plans, but none of those citywide solutions have been, not a single one has been implemented in any of the smart cities, right? What
Ma'am,
we have is partial solutions.
I
ma'am,
have
I
one
have a
more.
point.
I have one more comment actually. You mentioned that the typical users of personal vehicles like cars, which are majorly the middle class and upper class, should shift to public transport. That is possible where provided we have good transport, I mean public
Yeah,
transport system. Like there are a lot of countries like Japan and other places where a lot of office going people don't use their personal car. They
yeah,
travel by metros or buses and they use the personal car only for their family outings or etc. So if that situation to come into India, we need good public transport and also good connectivity.
yes.
Like Delhi, a lot of places are still not connected by any public transport.
Agreed. In fact, most of our cities do not have fully viable
Yeah,
public
yeah, that's
transport.
right. Public transport. That is the major issue.
I agree.
No, I have a
Okay.
point. Can I make a point?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, well, I've been also talking to many transport planners. One planner who, planned the first ring road of Delhi long back in 1960s when the first master plan was made. He makes a very interesting point every time. The entire problem with this planning is people who plan and people who are taking decisions, they will always support a mode of transport that themselves drive because they themselves drive in cars, they take like government vehicles or whatever. So they will always prefer that things should be done to build a flyover and everything. Second point, what ma'am said, I have a very different point of view. All these initiatives that we have been taking are primarily ad hoc ones. It primarily depends on if a good officer is there. You said, Pune started it because maybe Pune has a very good commissioner, maybe Pune has a very good smart city administrator. Same thing happened in Andhra Pradesh. I'm forgetting the small city which is doing very well. Surat, same thing. But once the leadership goes, then it completely collapses. So the issue is until we involve people, it is driven by people, cities will never be sustainable. One government will come, one particular commissioner will come, he will give an idea, then it will go back. I just give an example of Rahagiri. If you see, Rahagiri is happening particularly in Haryana, that is Gurgaon, little bit part of Delhi. That's primarily because the people who are driving it, like Sarika, very good work. They stay in Gurgaon, they have good relation with Chief Minister, they have convinced the Deputy Commissioner, but maybe the day Deputy Commissioner or the Commissioner changes and the government changes, you will see everything going for six. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have.
Ma'am, I have one more question actually. I mean, we had been talking about non-motorized mobility, like walking and bicycling. Why, in spite of so many people talking about this issue for such a long time, still we have not really made any progress in this direction in any of the cities? As you mentioned, always the priority is given for making flyovers for faster movement of vehicles, etc., etc. And the walkways and the bicycle tracks have not really come up in any city.
Yeah. There are 2, 3 thoughts and theories about when do cities begin to even think about environmental issues and sustainability. Okay? And one theory goes that basically societies move to first from being what being with nature kind of a stage to thinking about humankind as being invincible, and therefore all burdens that we face vis-a-vis nature need to be taken care of. Like Mr. Dash talked about how bicycling is difficult because of the weather that we have, the climate, which is quite harsh, whether it is the heat or whether it is the rains. So moving from these kind of what climatic kind of issues and reducing their impact on the human body, making human lives very convenient, productive, that is what city making has been all about, right? And at these points, people don't think about environment at all. They are so uncaring. And it is when they begin to have economically productive lives, then they actually begin to think about the cost of environment. So in several cities, for example, New York and this tale in America is very, very interesting. We were not about New York, but several cities had public transport systems, uh, especially railway systems. And these were taken away by the Ford company, which invested in many of these railroads, considered them down and out, and then specifically promoted both highways and then actually their cars. Okay, so which is how you see a particular design of only vast highways which have come up in the US, which have made private car their motive almost. So this is at one stage where you have completely not cared for environment at all, destroyed it in every way. But you see now there is a lot of thought which is being given both to sustainability and to public transport. One sees the same things and in a much more stronger manner in Scandinavian cities and in European cities, right? So should we wait for that kind of a theory where India becomes economically developed, where the basic burdens of life are alleviated, and then there is a much more stronger both governmental pressure and people pressure? See, because what we are caught in is really uh, there is no downward demand for some of these sustainable solutions. No? Whereas the private car is seen not just as a way to move, but it is also a prestige symbol. To possess a car, to own a car, then what kind of a car? Then if it is a high-speed car, a large car, then it has to be also driven fast. So therefore a road on which it can move freely. So all of these become links. Okay? And I think therefore working on the demand side is important, just as then working on the policy side is important. Currently, I think we are caught in a trap where on the policy side, everything happens in an extremely limited manner, right? So you have a street vendor policy, but in which there is no thought of road safety at all. Or you have a motor vehicles act, which thinks of only motors and roads, right? It doesn't think of other broader stakeholders at all, right? And I think therefore one needs to have a more comprehensive view of things, and that can only happen because these policies ultimately, you know, in Marathi we have this saying which says yatha praja tatha raja, right? So I think I am not talking that there is a single one-on-one kind of a relationship between them, but we don't have demand for more sustainable transport and more sustainable and safe streets at all.
Mr. Deepak, you want to add anything?
Yeah, what ma'am said is I completely agree. I remember there was a discussion on public transport, and one of our New Delhi MP and some other politicians were there. I was also in the same panel. I told them, you were talking about that people should use public transport. I said, I will wait for a day when my minister, my MP, he will come down from a bus or from the metro, enter the parliament. Until that happens, it will not happen in our country. And why I'm saying it, 2 days back, when government started this cycle for challenge India, for about 11 cities they're going to choose. So one of the cycle experts who heads the entire cycle movement department in Amsterdam, he told a very interesting thing. He said, these are not going to happen until your own celebrities, your own models, they actually start using public transport, they cycle, they walk. So that is the problem, people who talk, they don't practice. And people who practice, their voice is not high. I think, so they are the only solution is either two ways. Either someone like Prime Minister speaks about Swachh Bharat, all toilets are built. Or people make a demand and the government is forced to do that. I think that these are the two ways out. Either top executive of the country, he has to say it so that everyone will listen to him, or maybe all of us at the ground level start demanding in our own areas, then things will change.
Thank you, Deepak. Ma'am, I have one more question for you. We already have these big metros where we are facing all these problems. And there are a lot of small towns now which are being industrialized and they are developing. And I'm sure in a decade or so, they would be like what big cities are now. Is there any concerted effort to not repeat all the problems or all mistakes what we have done in the existing metros, and so that those small towns which are growing now will not have these problems? So they will have better systems. I mean, all the problems what we have been discussing till now.
If one looks at the demographic trends in India, what we've been doing very, very systematically is to actually take the life out of small towns. Okay? The census 2011 in fact shows two very interesting trends. One is that there are many, many small towns today which are in the periphery of metros. Okay?
Yeah.
And which tells us that it is the metro which is the life of these small towns which surround a large city, right? The second is that there are some small towns, for example, Kerala presents a very different example, where you have a pattern of small towns where so there are not very, very large cities, right? But there are several small towns. Tamil Nadu presents an entirely interesting example also, where you will see that Chennai has not grown very, very large. Okay? You still have a fairly spread out mode of urbanization and of population of cities. So the first thing is to think of that, right? If you have highly centralizing tendencies of the economy and you pursue policies which are centralizing, then you will only have one or two cities in a particular state which are growing and rest of the towns not growing, right? So that is the first route to thinking about sustainability. The second part is in small towns, sometimes you have the same centralizing tendency applied within. Okay? So the government of India had received something like, I think, over 250, I think, applications from different cities asking for metros to be installed. Now, metro is a public transport, it's a good option, definitely, but yet it is not an option which can be applied to every scale of a city. If a small town is compact per se, then the metro does not make any sense at all. But when metro becomes a symbol that, hey, we have developed and we have arrived. Okay? So one good beginning that the government of India made towards this is it formed a committee. It has formed a panel which now assesses and studies all these proposals which come to it. and then decides at what stage should a metro be advisable. Okay? And so what I say is there is a beginning which has been made. Okay? But otherwise, the tendency is even within small towns and even at a larger level to keep on centralizing. And then one becomes the demand for other. One should not take on things which are not suitable to the economy or the geography of a particular place.
Deepak, you want to add anything?
Yeah, ma'am, what ma'am said again, I'm so just supporting it. She talked about metro. Uh, if you go, look at the official records of government, when Vijayawada started, there was a proposal to put a metro. Niti Aayog opposed it, but government actually allowed it. So the problem is, they have done it till the time it suited them. Like we saw a metro coming in Indore, few kilometer metro in Jaipur, now Kanpur. I don't know what kind of things have happened. Now suddenly they have realized, no, it's not sustainable. Primarily not because of anything else, because their political aim or ambition has been achieved. Otherwise, several projects just before election would not have been cleared. I'm not making a political point, but the issue is, as you said rightly, now they have put a committee which is looking at the entire thing. They are saying, if there is no need of metro, let's go for monorail. If no monorail, let's go for metro light. Interesting things, good ideas. But as I said in the beginning, the problem is not with the planning or good ideas. The planning is, the issue is, it's all driven about single individuals in the government. If one secretary, government of India, MOA secretary or urban development secretary, he thinks differently, he pushes a different idea. If the CEO of Niti Aayog changes, maybe there will be different ideas altogether. So I think the time has come, either we as a media or you as professionals who can make a point on the government which they will listen, we should try to say that let's make it an institution which is not, or which cannot change simply because of changing of a person in the chair. That's my point of view.
Ma'am, there is a question from participant. He is asking basically what is the level of collaboration between the planners, the policy makers and academic institutes like yours in whenever they are working on some new planning for new highways, etc.
There are very strong collaborations, I would say.
Okay.
So at 2-3 levels where I would say, for example, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi, they all have now transportation wings and they consistently take up projects which are also moving towards sustainability. Having said that, I think the limitation often is that the institution within which these programs are situated are biased towards particular disciplines. So in IIT, you will see engineering oriented solutions. In SPA, you will see planning, but planning which is biased for only transport and moving people, right? Moving things, okay? Passenger car units, that's the concept, right? And that's what transportation planners do. Okay, the entire age of more interdisciplinary studies, okay, and thinking all together. So where transportation engineers talk to transportation planners, talk to transport overall sustainability planners, I think that is somewhere and the kind of collaboration which also needs to happen in the future. There is a place for the specialists, but firstly, there needs to be also a case where there is much more interdisciplinary thinking. Sustainability is not one discipline. Sustainability is actually about all of us and different disciplines interacting.
There's another question from a participant saying that in the post-COVID, that is immediate right now, when the COVID restrictions are being lifted. One is supposed to maintain the social distancing, etc. What is your suggestion about how the public transport system should gear up to meet this demand?
I think we need to make extremely strong demands. A, that public transport systems should be actually encouraged, strongly supported by the public in a post-COVID scenario. In fact, even during the COVID scenario, I think our experience is basically that in Bombay, the BST buses have actually been an extremely strong mode of support even for supply of materials and
Yeah,
essential people from here to there. There are many people and personnel from BEST who have actually been also on the front line. They are not recognized as the frontline warriors, but they are. Having
yeah,
said that, I think, how does one think about social distancing? Uh, it's very challenging, very difficult. And
yes,
one is aware that the minute perhaps suburban railways, local transport systems are allowed, there is going to be a whole lot of rush
chaos.
because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
are sheerly so inadequate in
yeah,
numbers. And that is a key thing. Uh, but we can only perhaps introduce this distancing by regulation at the stations, regulating the movement of how many people go in, maybe make things more human at that. But we do not have the technology then to move people faster, because that has to be a long-term script where people begin to stay more closer to their workplaces, where there are alternate modes of commuting which are possible. But till the design of our cities remains in a very wonky geography where jobs are located in one place and everyone has to move there. The other part that in which we can perhaps reduce density is to introduce some split timings for work. Can those be segregated? I think at the beginning of this entire webinar, we started with the fact that today at least about 8 to 10% of jobs can be done from home.
yeah, yeah,
So
yes,
then I think that is something that one, so there are multiple solutions that one should start thinking of and introduce not just distancing, but this kind of a gradation, reduce the number of people who have to actually move and pass through public transport.
ma'am, you have said it correctly. I think based on COVID experience, many organizations which never thought of allowing their people to work from home have realized the general efficiency of work, what is being delivered from home, I believe is better than what it used to be when people used to come to office and work together. So I feel that there should be some guideline to say that the organizations which work which can be done from home without going to a specific work office should be allowed to function from home, so that it will definitely reduce number of people moving to reach the workplace. Deepak, you have anything to add?
I again completely support what you both have said, because there is you cannot disagree to all these ideas. There cannot be
Yeah,
like you have to
correct.
say something different.
Yeah,
But the issue is that the same while we do all these things, let's also look at our own way how things happen in our cities. 5-10 years back, if you look at Delhi, Mumbai, maybe running a PCO or a real estate business, that was like an informal sector. Many people got engaged. Number of jobs are not in offices. Let's try to understand that. In cities, the formal people going to offices, government jobs, private jobs is less. It's all in the informal sector, and those people have to travel. So you cannot say that maybe, as you were saying, maybe 5 or 10% people don't travel, but the rest of us, all of us, have to travel. So I think that makes it much more difficult. Maybe when we sit inside our homes, we think that people will not go out. No, please go out. Go to the streets. You see how people are actually going, taking rickshaws, cycles, to open shops. Everything is happening. Once that happens, you can't stop that. So maybe for that, one thing the government has to do, every government, every city government, we need to increase the number of city buses. We know that city bus limit should not be more than 45 to 50 people, but we see how many 100 people, 120 people, they get into the buses. Third thing that I will suggest is, there is a need for the STUs or the city transport authorities to have a proper rationalizing the route system, which has happened in cities like Mysore, some cities in Karnataka have actually done it very well. Maybe West has also done. But if you look at the other cities like Delhi, Lucknow, Kanpur, northern part, there has been no planning. When people want to come from their office to home, they will be waiting for buses for about half an hour. I think this is the time we need to think of everything so that, when we stagger working hours, also at the same time ensure that enough number of buses, if these don't get crowded, not just for COVID, but also to avoid any road crash. That's it.
Madam, as far as the public transport system is concerned, right now, most of the cities, the public transport capacity is inadequate in the normal situation. Now, if we have to superimpose so-called the distancing and restrict the number of people who are going to travel by these modes, then the problem becomes multifold. So, I'm not very sure whether the government or the concerned authorities are thinking in this and trying to work out some immediate solution, because once the COVID lockdown gets fully relaxed, all the people who have gone out will come back to their workplace, work locations, and they all need to travel. Your suggestion that they should live closer to workplace can happen, but it will take time.
I agree. No, that is why I began this entire seminar with the point that the post-COVID situation is not going to emerge like a miracle.
Yeah, of course, it has to be well thought of
And I think
pick points from what we have experienced.
And if we look at how we are coping with COVID, it doesn't fill me with a lot of hope that we are thinking systematically, that we are bringing different elements of strategies together. It really doesn't inspire much confidence in me, honest.
I agree with you. Any participants have any questions? They can raise their hand. Swati, can you unmute Mr. K. Nagaraj, Dr. Nagaraj's thing?
Sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me, sir. I'm Dr. Nagaraj from Bangalore.
Yeah.
I am from Bangalore. No, I don't have any question.
Oh, I thought you had a question. Oh,
no, sir.
The other some other question is about the last mile connectivity. Actually, they are talking about. Though people use public transport, still for reaching the starting point of the public transport, they need to travel from home to that place, and so also at the end of the public transport lap. So that's also a major issue, because as you mentioned, we discussed the possibility of somebody walking to the public transport facility is also difficult, and there is no infrastructure to provide for non-motorized transportation to the starting point. So in such a situation, all these e-rickshaws and other small vehicles have mushroomed, and they are also creating a lot of problem, in the sense they are becoming uncontrollable. So what do you think how to address this situation?
I think it's definitely fits within the smart city narrative.
Oh, I see.
And they are, I think there are many cities that I have heard of which are thinking of rickshaws, especially e-rickshaws, as the last mile connectivity point. Okay. Having said that, it is also a contested policy. It is contested because for rickshaws who have always seen themselves as parallel service providers, not necessarily only the last mile connectivity providers. These become issues of economics, right? How do the auto rickshaw drivers, operators who only run small distances, how can they earn modes of a full month's earning, a livable income, right? So I think that's why I think this comprehensiveness of thinking and constantly having a larger strategy, but to think that for every stakeholder there is a particular interest, right? And to appreciate that some of those interests need to be thought of, because in our country we are not just talking of machines, right? There are people
Yeah,
and there are active economic interests behind each of those persons, right?
correct.
So I think we need to think of a viable scale of economy, and then I think this will work out.
Uh, any questions from any participant?
No, can I ask a question to ma'am?
Oh, sure. Why not?
Mr.
No,
Dash.
because why I'm asking, because you have been seeing different governments from close quarters, how they behave, how they take decisions. And what I have seen again, most of the people who are in the academic side, as you said, SPA, IIT, unfortunately, what we have been seeing for quite some time, that they are becoming the biggest consultants of the government. And what we actually expect, that people with professional knowledge, who should talk or speak very boldly, we have seen how they have supported government decisions, despite knowing well that that could be not right. I think that that's a big challenge, because when anyone says that this particular thought has come from IIT Delhi, IIT Mumbai, IIT Madras, it makes everyone gets attracted. Yes, there must be some credibility. It has come from SPA. There is some credibility. But actually we see, in several cases, we have seen how these reputed institutions or their experts, their professors, they have simply told the government line. What is the way out, ma'am?
Actually, what I see is something for which I see actually Pune as a very interesting example. And I think interesting example because in Pune, civil society like yours and with many others have adopted a extremely professional and systematic approach, not just to making demands, but actually researching a lot of these things. Okay. Now, when civil society becomes the prompt for many of these things, then there are changes which are even government policy has to bend. There is and it not just has to bend, but then academics gets a support. Okay. See, because often what happens when you talk, Mr. Dash, of the institutions towing the government line, it is also because of pressure, right? It is
Yeah.
also because governments are your patrons. Okay? Fortunately, in our country, this is not a universal thing that I can say, and that's with confidence. Okay, because the government does not support all research, therefore, it is still fairly independent, right? But I think the involvement of civil society can make independent research actually happen. In Pune, I have seen that this kind of a organization of civil society has ensured that firstly, there will be a coordinated public transport, bus transport across Pune and Pimpri Chinchwad. This kind of active civil society intervention put stop on bridges which were being converted, which were being constructed right in the riverbed of Mura. Okay. This kind of a civil society intervention ensured that there is some kind of a checkpoint on what are the metro routes and how will they pass, where will they come down, what needs to be protected and what can be let go of. And I think civil society, especially in our country, because in our country, government cannot be the only solution provider. It doesn't have that. Most other solutions are provided by society. So then civil society has to play a very strong role. The weakness of civil society is basically that civil society often represents narrow interests. It does not have the backing of knowledge.
Yes,
But
yes.
when civil society also engages and builds up relationships with academia, with different institutions, I think there can be a fairly strong force that one can also cultivate.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Before closing, I would request both the panelists, Dr. Amita Hide and Deepak, to give 2 points, one of immediate impact and one long term, how to improve road safety.
As I said, I think the first target that the government should have, and I'm going to write about it, that now as we know that more two-wheelers will come onto the roads, it's high time that Government of India, Bureau of Indian Standard, they come out with a mandatory helmet standard now. No non-ISI standards helmets should not be sold. That should be priority number one to safety.
We are not audible. Deepak.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. So what I'm saying is my first idea is, maybe I'll also write about it, that government should, and BIS, the Bureau of Indian Standard, they should make it now mandatory that no non-ISI helmet must not be sold. That should be number one, primarily because we know more and more people will be using two-wheelers, and this decision should be taken as quickly as possible. That should be number one. And number two, as you said, what I also believe, being a person who rides about public transport, uses public transport, that in city we must increase the number of buses, make it more comfortable, because there are very little chance of dying in a road crash if you are inside a bus. These are the two things.
Ma'am.
For me, I think the agenda would be, in spite of the difficulties, encourage public transport as much as possible. I am very, very apprehensive that the COVID crisis will actually be taken as a thing for encouragement of private vehicles, saying that वहाँ से corona नहीं होता है, public transport से corona होता है. So I am very apprehensive about that. So public transport should be number one agenda, and consolidating public transport such that it enables social distancing is perhaps my second agenda, though I understand it's a little bit long term. And the most long term would be to place road safety and transportation as part of an overall sustainability perspective, which is complex.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to thank both the panelists for their very interesting, very different points of view and new direction to the whole discussion. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank all the participants for their, joining
It
for
was
this
very good
webinar
to have
and
this discussion.
being with us on a Sunday. Thank you very much.